the dust of Willow Creek carried more whispers than wind that summer. Every porch, every corner of the town had only one topic: the Dawson girl is getting married. But not just to anyone. 19-year-old Clara Dawson, the orphaned daughter of a failed rancher, was set to marry Cole Hartley, the richest cowboy in the entire county. A man twice her age, whose name alone could silence a room. Some said she was lucky. Others said she was being sold. Clara said nothing. She just watched the horizon that night, her eyes heavy with the weight of a future she never asked for. Her uncle, Ray Dawson, had made the deal behind closed doors, a debt settled with a marriage. "You'll live like a queen, girl," he told her, patting her shoulder with a hand that smelled of whiskey and greed. "Cole ain't a bad man. He just needs a wife to calm his house down." But Clara knew better. Cole wasn't looking for love. He was looking for something else, something hidden beneath that cold stare and that iron voice that could turn cattlemen into dust. The morning of the wedding, the town gathered outside the small white chapel. The sky was too bright, almost mocking. Clara stood before the mirror, wearing her late mother's dress, the lace yellowed by time, her fingers trembling as she fastened the last button. There were no flowers, no bridesmaids, no laughter. Just silence and stares. When she stepped out of the carriage, whispers rippled through the crowd like a cruel breeze. "Poor thing, barely a woman yet. He bought her that dress, you know. 19 and married to a man who owns half the state." Each word pierced deeper than the pins holding her veil. Inside the chapel, Cole Hartley stood tall and unreadable. His dark coat fit like armor, his hat shadowing eyes that had seen too much. He nodded slightly as Clara walked down the aisle, not in affection, but in acknowledgement, like a man receiving property. The priest's voice echoed softly, the vows recited like a transaction. When the ring slid onto her finger, it felt heavier than iron. "You may kiss the bride," the priest said. But Cole only tilted his hat and muttered, "Not here." That silence screamed louder than any crowd ever could. That night, Clara was led to the Grand Hartley Ranch, a mansion of wood, stone, and secrets. The workers lined the path, staring with blank faces as the new Mrs. Hartley entered her golden cage. Dinner was quiet. Cole barely spoke, except to say, "You'll find this life easier if you don't ask questions." She nodded, forcing a polite smile. But inside, a fire began to burn, small, defiant, dangerous. Days turned into weeks. Clara's mornings were filled with the sound of horses, the smell of hay, and the endless echo of loneliness. The maids whispered about her kindness. The ranch hands whispered about her sadness. Cole, on the other hand, was a ghost, leaving at dawn, returning at dusk, his face untouched by emotion. Until one evening, he came to her porch with something in his hand, a small, dusty box. "A wedding gift," he said simply. "You didn't open it that day." Clara blinked, confused. "A gift?" He nodded and placed it in her hands. Inside was a small golden locket, engraved with the initials CD, her father's. "How did you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Cole's jaw tightened. "Your father and I, we weren't just neighbors. He saved my life once, during a fire on the old ridge. I owed him a debt I could never repay. Until now." Clara felt her breath catch. Her father, the man the town mocked as a failed dreamer, had once saved the man she was forced to marry. "Then why," she began, but Cole interrupted softly, "Because your uncle came to me, begging. He said you'd lose everything your father left behind. The land, the horses, the gravesite. I didn't marry you to own you, Clara. I married you to protect what was his. And yours." The truth hit her like a storm. All those whispers, all that pity, none of them knew. Cole hadn't bought her. He had bought her freedom in disguise. But the town didn't stop talking. The gossip only grew. "She looks miserable. He doesn't love her. She's just his charity case." Clara endured it in silence, until one Sunday, when the entire town gathered at the church fair. Cole arrived beside her, silent as always, but that day, something in him had changed. After the mayor's speech, Cole stood up and called for everyone's attention. "I've got something to say," he began, his voice carrying through the murmurs. "Most of you think I forced this girl into marriage. You whisper that she's a burden, that she's trapped. But you're wrong. He took Clara's hand, the first time he'd ever done it in public, and led her to the stage. Clara's father gave me my life once. And now, it's time the town knew what kind of daughter you raised. He nodded toward his men, who rolled forward a large covered frame. When he pulled the sheet away, gasps filled the air. It was a deed, a legal document transferring ownership of half the Hartley ranch to Clara Dawson Hartley. "This is her wedding gift," Cole said firmly. "She owns half of everything I do, the land, the cattle, the name. She's not a guest in my home. She's the mistress of it." The crowd fell silent. Even the wind stopped. Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding as tears filled her eyes. The same people who pitied her now looked at her with awe, some even bowed their heads. Cole turned to her and whispered so only she could hear, "Now they'll never speak against you again." It was then, for the first time, she saw behind the steel in his eyes, a man who had carried guilt for years, paying it back the only way he knew how. And maybe, just maybe, something more than guilt had begun to grow in that silence. That night, Clara walked out to the porch, staring at the endless sky. Cole joined her quietly, the air between them soft with something unspoken. "You didn't have to do all that," she said gently. He smiled faintly. "I know. But I wanted to." And in that moment, with the moonlight brushing the fields, the girl who had been forced into marriage realized, maybe fate hadn't trapped her after all. Maybe it had given her a second chance, wrapped in silence and dust. The days after the fair were unlike anything Clara had ever known. The town that once whispered behind her back now greeted her with warm smiles and lowered hats. The storekeepers offered her fresh bread, the children waved as she rode by, and the women who had once pitied her now sought her company. But even as the world softened, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that Cole's grand gesture had come from something deeper, something unsaid. His silence lingered, his eyes heavier than ever. Every time she thanked him, he just nodded and said, "You don't owe me thanks, Clara." Not yet. That "yet" haunted her. It carried a weight she couldn't name, and a sadness she couldn't ignore. Nights grew colder, and Cole began spending them in his office, poring over ledgers and letters she wasn't allowed to see. One evening, when he didn't come to dinner again, Clara walked quietly to the office door and listened. His voice, rough and quiet, broke through the wooden frame. "Yes, Doc. I understand. Just don't tell her yet." Her breath caught. Tell her what? The next morning, she confronted him gently at breakfast. "Cole, what's wrong?" He looked up, startled, then smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides pain. "Nothing for you to worry about, Mrs. Hartley." But the more he avoided her gaze, the clearer it became, something was wrong. Very wrong. And that night, when he rode out to the north pasture, she followed. The moon was high, silver on the fields, when she saw him dismount near the old barn and collapse against a post, clutching his chest. Panic shot through her veins. She ran to him, calling his name, her voice breaking in the cold night. "Cole. Cole, what's happening?" He tried to speak but only managed to faint. "Go back inside, Clara." She didn't listen. With trembling hands, she helped him back to the house and stayed up till dawn by his side, tears streaming as he slept in fitful silence. The doctor came the next morning, his face grim. "He's been hiding it for months," he said quietly. "His heart's failing. He didn't want anyone to know, especially you." The words hit like thunder. Her chest burned. The man she thought was untouchable, the man who had married her out of duty, was fading right before her eyes. Days turned into a slow blur of care and fear. Cole, stubborn as always, tried to go about his work, insisting, "The ranch needs me." But every time he winced in pain, Clara's heart cracked a little more. And one evening, when the sunset bathed the fields in blood-red light, she finally broke. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, standing behind him on the porch. He didn't turn around. "Because I didn't want you to pity me." Her voice trembled. "I wouldn't pity you, Cole. I'd stand with you." He finally turned then, eyes tired but soft. "You already have, Clara. You just don't realize it." And then, slowly, he told her the truth. His fortune, the vast Hartley ranch, was not just money earned, it was guilt money. Years ago, when his land expansion forced local families to sell cheap, one of those families was hers. Her father had begged Cole to stop, saying the land meant more than money, and when Cole refused, a fire broke out on their property. Cole had rushed to help, pulling her father from the flames, but her mother had died that night. "I've carried that weight every day since," he said hoarsely. "So when your uncle came to me, I saw a chance to make things right. I married you not to own you, Clara, but to give back what I took from your family. That's why half the ranch bears your name." His voice cracked. "That's the real wedding gift." Clara's world went silent. The stars above blurred as tears filled her eyes. All those months she had thought she was a pawn, when in truth, she was his redemption. "You've been carrying pain that wasn't yours alone," she whispered, taking his hand. "Then let me carry it with you." He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time. That night, for the first time, he let her rest her head on his chest, and she felt his heartbeat, fragile but alive. They talked till dawn, about everything they'd both lost, and everything they could still build. And in that quiet dawn light, love finally found its place between them, unspoken, but real. But fate, as always, had one more test. Winter came harsh and early. The ranch lost cattle to the cold, the men grew restless, and one night, a storm tore through the valley. Cole insisted on riding out to help the ranch hands secure the fences. "You'll die out there," Clara cried. He only smiled. "If it's my time, it won't be the storm that takes me, it'll be the guilt I didn't face. But I've faced it now, Clara. You made me brave again." She begged him to stay, but he kissed her forehead gently and whispered, "Lock the door. I'll be back before morning." The storm raged for hours, thunder shaking the windows, wind howling like 1,000 ghosts. But when dawn came, only the wind remained. The men brought him home at sunrise, cold, pale, but peaceful. He had saved 2 workers trapped in the storm, but lost his own life doing it. Clara didn't cry that morning. She sat by his side, holding his hand, whispering the words she'd never said aloud. "You gave me a name, a home, and a truth worth living for. You didn't die a millionaire, Cole Hartley. You died my hero." A week later, the town gathered again, this time, not for gossip, but for respect. The same people who had once doubted their marriage now stood with tears in their eyes as Clara read from a folded letter Cole had left behind. In it, he wrote, "If you're reading this, it means I kept my promise. The ranch is yours now, every inch of it. Not because I owe you, but because you earned it. I built this place with money. You'll rebuild it with heart." Her voice broke as she folded the letter and looked at the crowd. "He taught me that love isn't about possession, it's about redemption. And I'll make sure his legacy is one that heals, not hurts." The crowd clapped softly, the sound like prayer. Years passed. The Hartley Ranch became a sanctuary for orphan children, just like Clara once was. The fields bloomed brighter, the fences stood taller, and in every gust of Texas wind, Clara swore she could still hear his voice, steady, proud, and kind. "You did good, Clara," it whispered. "You did real good." And as the sun set over the land they once shared, Clara stood at the porch, no longer a frightened girl, no longer a bride bought by fate, but a woman who had turned pain into purpose. Her heart was full, her eyes bright. She smiled softly at the sky and said, "Rest easy, cowboy. I'll keep your promise alive."